I still remember the exact sound of her voice when she said it. No warning, no hesitation. Just a cold, flat line that cut straight through me. Dad, you're just a memory now. Those were her words, not in anger, not in grief, but in a tone that told me I no longer had a place in her life. I stood there holding my phone like it weighed 100 pounds. I had called her hoping to check in, maybe even hear something about her new job or the apartment she said she was excited about. I wanted one simple moment that reminded me she was still my daughter. Instead, she gave me a sentence I can't unhear. Even now, when I close my eyes, I can feel the shock hitting me first. Pure disbelief. It felt like the ground shifting under my feet. I waited for her to laugh, to say she didn't mean it, that it came out wrong. But the silence that followed carried nothing but distance. Heavy, cold distance. I asked her why she would say something like that. She didn't answer at first. I could hear movement on her end. Footsteps, a door closing, the muffled sound of someone else talking. Then she spoke again, but her tone had changed. It sounded rehearsed, almost like she was reading from a script someone else had written. People move on, Dad. You have to accept that. People move on. As if I had been holding her back. As if the years I spent giving her every chance I never had meant nothing now. A part of me wanted to ask if she remembered who paid for her tuition when she couldn't work during school. If she remembered the nights I stayed awake helping her study. If she remembered the years of savings I poured into her future so she'd never have to carry the weight I did. But I didn't ask. The truth was starting to show itself in small, sharp pieces, and I wasn't ready to face it yet. She rushed through the rest of the conversation. Short answers, avoiding every question, her voice dropping whenever the person in the background spoke. I could feel someone else's presence shaping her words, pushing her away from me. It wasn't just disrespect. It was influence, control, something colder than simple anger. And underneath her dismissive tone, there was something even stranger. She didn't sound happy. There was no real emotion in her words, no warmth, no frustration, nothing. Just emptiness, like she had been taught to disconnect. That was the moment suspicion began creeping in, slow at first, like a shadow stretching across a room. I didn't know the whole truth yet, but I could feel the edges of it. Something was wrong in her life. Something she didn't want to say out loud, something she couldn't say even if she wanted to. But the part that broke me, the part that carved the deepest wound, was knowing I had been the one who carried her future on my back. Every opportunity she had, every step she took into adulthood, was built on what I gave. Her education, her housing, her stability, her dream career. I had used my own savings, working longer shifts, skipping things I needed just to make sure she never fell behind. Yet when she looked at her life now, she didn't see me in it at all. She only saw a shadow she wanted to erase. After the call ended, I sat in the quiet of my living room, listening to the emptiness around me. I tried to understand how a daughter could disconnect so easily. But as the minutes passed, suspicion slowly turned into dread. Something had changed her. Something was influencing her choices, her tone, her distance. And I knew this wasn't the end of the story. It was the beginning of something darker, something I hadn't prepared for. Tell me, what would you do if your child spoke to you like a stranger? When I think back on my daughter's life, I don't start with the pain. I start with the small moments. The mornings when she used to climb onto the couch beside me with a bowl of cereal, her head resting on my arm as she watched cartoons. I start with the nights she ran to me after a nightmare, trusting I could make the world feel safe again. Those memories used to warm me. Now they press against my chest with a weight I never expected to carry. I was a single father most of her childhood. That meant every bill, every choice, every sacrifice came back to me. I didn't complain. I took extra shifts, kept old clothes longer than I should, ate simple meals so she could have what she needed. When she wanted to join after-school programs, I figured out how to make it work. When she talked about college, I started saving before she even finished middle school. Tuition wasn't cheap, but neither is hope. I used most of my savings, took out a small loan, and even delayed some repairs on the house so she could study without worry. I told myself it was worth it when she called me freshman year and said, "Dad, I couldn't do this without you." I held on to those words for years. Even after she graduated, I helped her find her first apartment. I paid the deposit and covered part of the first few months until she got stable hours at her new job. When her car broke down, I paid for the repair because she needed it to get to work. When she had medical bills she couldn't handle, I stepped in again. I never kept score. Parents don't. We give because that's what love looks like when you're older and they're still building their lives. But somewhere along the way, the warmth between us started to fade. Not all at once, just little things at first. A shorter tone, a forgotten thank you, a missed call she didn't return. I told myself she was busy, adjusting to adulthood, finding her own rhythm. I didn't want to see the shift happening, so I didn't. I ignored the first disrespect, then the second. I kept believing things would settle back into place. Then she met him. She introduced him with excitement at first, but something about the way she looked at me that day felt off. Like she was already bracing for his judgment. When I asked simple questions about him, she became defensive, as if protecting him from a threat that wasn't there. He stood quietly beside her, smiling, but his eyes felt distant, cold, calculating. After that, she changed in ways that didn't make sense. She stopped mentioning her job struggles to me, stopped asking for advice, stopped sharing anything real. When I reminded her I had paid off her last semester's fees so she could graduate without debt, she brushed it aside as if it was ancient history. When I brought up the apartment deposit, she acted like she didn't remember. And when I asked about the car I fixed for her, she told me she had managed mostly on her own. It was like pieces of our past, pieces I sacrificed for, were being erased one at a time. Not forgotten, rewritten. Her partner didn't say much around me, but his presence did the talking. He stood a little too close, answered questions meant for her, watched me as if calculating what influence I still had. I felt something shift inside her, like loyalty being tugged in a direction that didn't lead home. Looking back, the signs of emotional abandonment were already there. Small, quiet seeds planted between the moments I told myself everything was fine. Seeds that grew into distance I couldn't ignore anymore. And yet, even now, I still feel the echo of those early years. The love that built her future. The sacrifices I made without hesitation. But love alone couldn't stop the slow drift that was coming. I just didn't know then how far she would go to forget everything we once were. It's strange how silence doesn't show up all at once. It creeps in, message by message, until you realize you're talking into a void you never knew existed. I learned that slowly, almost painfully, through the way my daughter began disappearing from my life, one unanswered text at a time. It started with simple things. A "good morning, kiddo." A "hope you got home safe." A "let me know if you need anything." Nothing dramatic, Nothing heavy, just the kind of small connection a parent keeps alive because it reminds them their child is still out there, still reachable, still theirs in some small way. But my messages sat there without replies. Hours turned into days, and days into patterns. I would see the little delivered sign, but nothing after that. No read, no typing, no hint that she even paused long enough to care. I told myself she was busy. I told myself she would respond when she had time. I gave her space, hoping it would make things better. It didn't. She only texted me when she wanted something. Money, a bill covered, a favor she didn't want to ask anyone else for. And when she did respond, the words felt stiff and short, like she was measuring every letter. It was as if someone had told her exactly how much emotion she was allowed to show. Once, after ignoring 5 of my messages over 2 weeks, she suddenly wrote, "Can you send me $150? It's important." No greeting, no explanation, no warmth. I sent it anyway. That's what parents do. But after that, silence again. It was like I only existed when my wallet did. Her tone became even stranger as time went on. When I asked how she was doing, she replied, "I'm managing. Please don't worry." Those weren't her words, not her voice, not her normal way of speaking. It sounded like she was repeating a line she practiced or was told to use. A few times, when she slipped and answered a call, I could hear him in the background, her partner. I never heard full sentences, just small commands, low corrections, or a single word that changed the way she spoke to me. Her answers grew clipped, guarded, almost like she was afraid to say the wrong thing with him in the room. Once, I asked if she had made it to work the day before. She told me she had been there all day and couldn't respond because it was too busy. But an hour earlier, she posted a photo online of her and her friends at a coffee shop. When I gently mentioned the mismatch, she grew defensive. "You're always checking up on me," she snapped in a text. "It's weird. Stop." But she had asked me 2 days earlier to help her pay her internet bill. The contradictions piled up like stones on my chest. Each one made it harder to ignore what was happening. Then came the timeline slips. She said she got home late from work, but the timestamp showed she was online all evening. She claimed her phone died after work, yet she posted stories from the same hours she ignored me. Small lies that didn't matter on their own, but meant everything when put together. It wasn't the lies themselves that broke me. It was the coldness behind them, the distance, the way she seemed to be pushing me out of her life while pretending everything was fine. And slowly, a painful truth began settling into place. Someone else was shaping her silence. Someone else was teaching her how to disconnect. Someone else was deciding how much of her I was allowed to have. I didn't want to believe it then, but the signs were there. Sharp, quiet, undeniable. Her silence wasn't just distance. It was grooming. It was control. It was the start of the erasure I hadn't seen coming. Tell me, when does silence become emotional cruelty? The first call came on a Tuesday morning, so early the sun hadn't fully reached the kitchen windows yet. I saw an unfamiliar number, hesitated, then answered. The woman on the line introduced herself from a financial aid office connected to a certification program my daughter once mentioned pursuing. "Mr. Reed, we're trying to reach Emily regarding her file. You're listed as her primary contact. Do you happen to know a better number for her?" Her primary contact. The words hit me like a reminder of a life she no longer allowed me to be part of. I told the woman I hadn't been able to reach my daughter recently. She apologized, then said they had called Emily several times about missing documents and a deadline she kept ignoring. There was a strain in her voice, a quiet concern under the professional tone. I felt something uneasy stir in my chest. Later that week, another call came, this time from a clinic. A nurse asked if I could confirm whether Emily received the reminders for her follow-up appointment. "We've tried her number, her email, everything," she explained. "Since you're still her emergency contact, we thought you might know if something is wrong. Emergency contact." The label carried a weight I wasn't sure I could hold anymore. I told the nurse the truth as gently as I could. My daughter had blocked me. Saying the words aloud felt like peeling off a bandage that never stopped bleeding. The nurse paused, then softened her voice. "I'm sorry you're dealing with that. We'll make a note on our end." A note. Another small mark added to a growing list of concerns. Within days, a third call came, this one from her employer. They were trying to update some tax information but couldn't reach her. They asked if I knew whether she changed phone numbers. I didn't. I didn't know anything about her life anymore except for the parts she used to ask money for. Each call said the same thing in a different voice. She wasn't responding to anyone, but every system still led back to me. At first, I didn't understand why. She had cut me out emotionally, shut me out of her world completely. Yet she hadn't bothered to change a single document that tied her life to mine. It was as if she wanted the benefits of my name without the burden of my existence. One receptionist from a program office mentioned something that sat heavy with me long after the call ended. "We've tried reaching her several times. No answer. We're beginning to worry." Worry. That word carried a sharpness I couldn't ignore. That night, I pulled out a notebook and wrote down every call, every name, every date. I didn't know why I did it, but instinct told me to keep track. Something was unfolding, and I didn't want to be caught unprepared again. As I organized the notes, a disturbing realization settled in. She had left my number on every official form, financial aid, medical files, employment paperwork, yet she wouldn't speak to me. She trusted me enough to hold her life together on paper, but not enough to let me into it. The more I wrote, the clearer it became. She wasn't just distant. She wasn't just cold. She was unreachable to everyone, not just me. And somehow, despite the emotional wall she had built, she still relied on my identity, my information, my role as the person who would catch her if something went wrong. Concern shifted into confusion. Confusion slowly twisted itself into something heavier, fear. Not for myself, but for her. For what she was caught in. For what she wasn't telling anyone. Because if a grown woman ignores her responsibilities, avoids every institution trying to help her, and still hides behind the name of the father she won't speak to, something is deeply wrong. And in that silence, one truth echoed loudest of all. She may have abandoned me emotionally, but legally and practically, she was still standing on the foundation I built, and pretending she didn't see it. The turning point wasn't one big discovery. It was a series of small cracks, tiny fractures in her stories that didn't line up no matter how hard I tried to bend them back into shape. I didn't want to believe something dangerous was happening. I kept telling myself I was overthinking, that she was just stressed or overwhelmed. But then she answered one of my calls, one of the very few she hadn't ignored, and everything I feared began to surface. She picked up quickly, almost too quickly, like someone had told her to handle it fast. Her voice was flat when she said, "What do you need, Dad?" "I just want to know if you're okay," I said. "People have been trying to contact you. Clinics, offices. You're missing things." "I handled it," she replied. But she hadn't. I knew she hadn't. "I got a letter today," I said gently. It has my name on an application I never submitted. Silence. Then a sudden shift in her voice. I don't know anything about that. Before I could say more, I heard him, her partner, in the background. Not full words, just a sharp whisper like he was coaching her. After that, her tone changed again, becoming tense and defensive. You're always checking up on me, she snapped. I told you I'm fine. But that wasn't her talking. Not the daughter I raised. It was the voice of someone being guided, corrected, controlled. A few days later, I decided to look over my mail more carefully. I found 2 envelopes I had pushed aside without thinking. One was a notice about a credit inquiry made in my name. Another was a letter asking me to verify information about a loan I never heard of. At first, I thought it was a mistake, maybe a clerical error. But the dates lined up with the same week she had ignored my messages. My stomach tightened. I knew I had to ask her again. When she finally responded to another message, I called her right away. She answered, but only after several rings. Her greeting was cold. Why are you calling again? I tried to stay calm. I need to ask you something important. Did you use my information on anything recently? That's ridiculous, she said. But what she didn't say mattered more than what she did. I got notification. Those places always mess things up. She interrupted quickly. You worry too much. Then it happened again. Another whisper in the background. Her breathing changed. The next thing she said came out stiff, like she was repeating someone else's script. You're stressing me out. Stop asking about my life. I closed my eyes, taking in the weight of her words. They felt wrong, forced, hollow. She wasn't arguing with me. She was protecting him. So I pushed one more time. Are you sure everything is okay? You sound different. She hesitated. Nothing is wrong. Just stop overreacting. I didn't believe her. Not anymore. That night, I went through every document I had kept over the years. Receipts, bank statements, even old copies of her school forms. I compared dates, signatures, addresses. Little inconsistencies started to appear. A signature that didn't look exactly like mine. An address I had never lived at. A number she used that I didn't recognize. Piece by piece, the truth came together like a puzzle I never wanted to complete. This wasn't just emotional distance. This wasn't just a daughter pulling away. This was coercive control. And I wasn't just losing my relationship with her. I was losing my identity to someone who saw me as an obstacle, not a father. The outrage came slowly, almost quietly, settling beneath my ribs like a growing flame. It wasn't anger at her. It was anger at what she had been pulled into. Anger at the hands that steered her. Anger at every lie that pushed me farther from the truth she didn't feel safe saying aloud. Looking at the documents spread across my table, I finally understood the scale of what I was facing. This wasn't family tension anymore. This was exploitation, one that used my daughter's vulnerability and my love as tools. Tell me, when would you start reading between the lines? The call that changed everything didn't come from her. It came from a number I didn't recognize, a government extension, the kind that makes your stomach tighten before you even answer. When I picked up, a calm but firm voice introduced herself as Miss Alvarez from the County Welfare Office. Mr. Reed, she said, we've received several reports of unreturned calls regarding your daughter. We'd like to speak with you since you are listed as her emergency contact. For a second, I couldn't breathe. Hearing someone else say out loud that they couldn't reach her, that it wasn't just me, hit harder than I expected. Fear rose first. Then something else followed behind it, something heavier. Validation. Maybe I hadn't been imagining everything. Maybe the pattern had been real all along. She scheduled an in-person interview for the next morning. I barely slept that night. When I walked into the small county office, an investigator joined us, Officer Bennett. He wasn't hostile or skeptical. He simply looked at me the way someone looks when they know a story's about to hurt. They asked me to start from the beginning, so I did. I told them about the ignored messages, the blocked number, the sudden change in her tone. I told them how every clinic and office said the same thing. She was unreachable. I showed them the letters with my name misused, the applications I never filled out, the mismatched signatures. I laid everything out on the table, every fear, every unanswered question, every clue I had collected. Ms. Alvarez took notes steadily, occasionally nodding. Officer Bennett leaned forward when I mentioned the partner's voice in the background, the way she repeated scripted lines, the contradictions in her stories. "Has she ever admitted someone else helps manage her affairs?" he asked. "No," I said. "She avoids every question about him." "And she's blocked you from calling her?" Ms. Alvarez added. "Yes." "Yet she still lists you on every official form as the primary contact?" "Yes." They exchanged a look that told me they had seen this before. Maybe not my exact story, but one's close enough to recognize the shape of it. After a long pause, Officer Bennett spoke carefully. "What you're describing fits early patterns of coercive control. It often escalates through isolation, financial misuse, and emotional dependency." Hearing those words made my chest tighten. I had feared it, sensed it, felt it in every strange silence. But hearing a professional say it aloud made the truth impossible to avoid. "We aren't accusing anyone yet," he continued. "But there is enough concern here that we need to open a welfare note." A welfare note, a formal record, a documented concern that something in her life was unsafe. They began asking deeper questions about her work history, her health, her circle of support, her habits before the partner entered her life. For the first time, I wasn't defending myself. I wasn't explaining why I cared or why I kept reaching out. I was simply answering questions that mattered. "Do you believe she's being influenced?" "I do." "Do you believe your identity may have been used without consent?" "Yes." "Do you believe she is safe?" That last question broke something inside me. I had never let myself ask it in such direct terms, but the truth came out before I could soften it. "No, I don't think she is." Ms. Alvarez set her pen down slowly. "Then we need to get ahead of this." They explained what would happen next. Monitoring, verification, contact attempts logged. Her employer would be alerted to check in. If things escalated, the case could move into formal investigation. Nothing dramatic, nothing sudden. Just steady, careful steps meant to protect someone too tangled in control to see the danger. When the meeting ended, I walked out into the cold air with a strange mix of fear and strength. The heartbreak of losing her was still there, but now it was layered with something steadier. Resolve. Someone finally believed me. Someone finally saw what I had been seeing. I wasn't shouting into the dark anymore. And for the first time, the path ahead didn't feel like a dead end. It felt like a beginning, one where the truth could no longer hide behind silence. Tell me, should authorities step in earlier? Courtrooms have a way of stripping everything down to the truth. No excuses, no distractions. Just facts laid out under lights that feel brighter than they should. When I walked into that room, I didn't know whether I would leave feeling relieved or shattered. All I knew was that months of fear, suspicion, and unanswered questions were about to be dragged into the open. The investigation had moved faster than I expected. Once the welfare office compared my statements to the flagged documents and the failed attempts to reach her, they escalated the case. And as more records were pulled up, the picture sharpened. Emails written in a tone that didn't sound like her, digital signatures that matched the wrong person, and transactions made from devices she didn't own. Every new finding pointed in the same direction. Her partner had woven himself into her life so tightly that she no longer knew where his decisions ended and hers began. When the judge entered, the room fell into a heavy silence. My daughter sat on the opposite side, next to the man who had quietly taken control of her world. She didn't look at me. Not once. Her eyes stayed fixed on the table, as if meeting mine would break something she wasn't ready to confront. The prosecutor laid out the findings first. My identity used to apply for credit lines. My information listed on documents I had never seen. Communications from clinics and offices ignored for months. Her partner's name appearing repeatedly in digital logs. Phone records showing calls blocked deliberately. Each piece was like a blow, confirming what I had feared. I had been used as a tool to fund a future I wasn't even welcome in. When the judge asked if my daughter wanted to speak, she finally lifted her head. But instead of honesty, I heard denial wrapped in blame. "He's exaggerating," she said, pointing toward me. "He wants to make me look irresponsible. I didn't do anything wrong. He's always trying to control my life." Her voice trembled, not with guilt, but with confusion. The man beside her leaned forward slightly, as if urging her on without saying a word. She followed his lead, denying every finding, refusing to acknowledge any misuse of my name. The judge stayed quiet as she spoke, letting her finish every sentence before lifting a stack of documents from the bench. "Ms. Reed," the judge said, "these records show patterns consistent with coercive control. Financial dependency, identity misuse, isolation. These are not small concerns." My daughter shook her head. "I didn't know." "That is exactly the point," the judge replied firmly. "You didn't know because someone else was directing your decisions." Then the judge turned their attention to her partner. His expression barely changed, but something sharp flickered in his eyes when they read the findings aloud. Fraud indicators, digital links to the applications, direct connections to the accounts created using my name, and patterns of communication showing he was present during nearly every call she refused to answer. He didn't deny anything. He didn't admit anything either. He simply sat there staring ahead, cold and empty. When the judge finished, the verdict was clear and direct. Protective restrictions were placed on him. He was barred from managing any financial or legal documents tied to her or to me. Further investigation into identity misuse was ordered. My daughter protested, insisting they were overreacting, that we handle things privately. But her words carried no weight. Not against the evidence, not against the truth everyone could finally see. The judge closed the session with a statement I will never forget. "Exploiting an elder's identity, support and trust for personal gain is a profound violation. This court acknowledges the seriousness of the harm done." Vindication should have felt empowering. Instead, it felt like standing in the ruins of a life I had spent years building for her. The court believed me. The evidence protected me. Justice had finally begun. But none of it brought my daughter back. None of it repaired the distance. None of it softened the cold look she gave me as she walked out with him, despite everything revealed. Tell me, was this judgment enough? There comes a time in a parent's life when holding on does more damage than letting go. I never thought I'd reach that point with my own daughter. I never imagined that the same child whose hand I once held across busy streets would become someone I had to step away from for my own peace. But after the court hearing, after watching her walk out beside the man who helped dismantle the bond we built, I knew I couldn't keep standing in the same place, waiting for her to turn around. I didn't make the decision in anger. It came quietly, the way heavy truths often do. I woke up one morning, sat at the edge of my bed, and finally admitted what I had been avoiding for months. The life I wanted for her was not the life she chose. And the father I had been for decades no longer had a place in the world she lived in. So I stepped back, not out of resentment, not out of defeat, but out of dignity. I stopped trying to track her messages. I stopped answering calls from institutions asking why she wasn't responding. I stopped checking social media for signs she was okay. I stopped replaying memories late at night, trying to pinpoint the exact second everything fell apart. That kind of searching only deepened the wound. Instead, I began filling the emptiness with something steadier. Routine. I started walking every morning before the sun rose. The air felt cleaner then, almost like it carried a promise that the day could still be good. I joined a local community group where no one asked about my family unless I chose to share. I cooked meals I hadn't made in years. I fixed up my garden, replacing old soil with fresh earth, something that reminded me healing could be grown from the ground up. There were quiet moments when the loss hit me hard. Birthdays, holidays, small thoughts like wondering how she was doing at work or whether she was safe. But each time the ache returned, I let it move through me instead of fighting it. Pain, when accepted, becomes something you can stand on instead of something that buries you. I also began thinking about the years ahead, not with fear, but with clarity. I thought about the legacy I wanted to leave behind, one rooted in honesty, not silence. One built on dignity, not desperation. I knew my daughter might never care to hear my side of the story, but that didn't mean the truth wouldn't matter someday. Because someday, she may have children of her own, and children ask questions. They look at photos. They notice missing pieces adults try to hide. And when that time comes, those grandchildren will learn who I really was, not through her anger or her distance, but through the things I've left behind. The life I built, the choices I made, the strength I held onto even when love turned into loss. Last Thanksgiving, I did something small but symbolic. I set one extra place at the table, not for her, but for the version of her I used to know, the version I raised, the version who laughed easily and trusted me completely. When the meal ended, I cleared the plate away gently, not in grief, but in acceptance. I wasn't waiting for her anymore. I wasn't holding a space for someone who chose another road. I was honoring what once was and releasing what no longer could be. Letting go didn't erase the love. It only protected what was left of me. As I move forward, I do it with quiet strength. I do it knowing that respect is not an optional gift children may or may not give their parents. It is a basic truth of human decency. And even if she never learns that, I will carry that truth with me for the rest of my days. Tell me, what do elders truly deserve in their final years?